Hello there everybody and welcome. My name is Margaret Findlay and I am Learning and Public Programmes Manager at the City Arts Centre in Edinburgh. A huge welcome to you all wherever you are in the world tonight, and thanks to Street Level Photoworks in Glasgow for running this event. Please do tell us in the Facebook comments where you're joining us from tonight, because it's really nice for us to know. I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight, both on a very personal basis, but also a professional basis, to introduce tonight's event, Close Up Robert Blomfield, a celebration of a wonderful and brilliant photographer whose recognition is now rightly growing steadily, and I'm so glad that the City Arts Centre was pivotal in this journey and that I was involved from the start. Robert died at the age of 82 at the end of last year, and thankfully saw the start and steady progress of his rightly deserved success and growing recognition as one of the most talented photographers of post-war Britain. All the more remarkable because he remained throughout his years behind the camera an amateur photographer. It was great also that Robert managed to see the publication of his first book, Robert Blomfield, Edinburgh, 1957 to 1966, published by Bluecoat Press. This publication will be the first of many, I'm sure, and we'll tell you more tonight about where you can get this publication. First up, we're going to view the documentary film called An Unseen Eye, made by the very talented Stuart Edwards filmmaker for the City Arts Centre exhibition, a remarkably heartfelt and tender film and a beautiful piece of filmmaking, and it really sets the context for us discussing Robert and his legacy tonight. Enjoy the film, and we'll see you shortly, and I'll introduce you to the family.
But the eye is the organ through which you see the picture, the image, this mysterious entity or non-entity. You know what dreams are made of.
His whole life seems to be through the viewfinder. He's from the age of about 13. He was always looking for the quirky, the funny in everything going on around him. All the time. It was his way of life.
I was studying medicine, but my passion was for my photography. I loved photography. I really enjoyed when I was in Edinburgh taking these pictures. I think it's a form of love. You love the picture. I really love taking photographs. I love the photographs. I sort of love the people. If it's a good photograph, it's a lovely thing. I was quite a shy person, and it's I suppose I used the camera as a protection to a certain extent. It gave me an excuse to go around places which, without a camera, I would have been shy of exploring.
What comes to your mind when you look over these images?
I think the danger of being big-headed, I say, that's a good photograph. If I look at them a bit longer, I think, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder where they are now. I feel affectionate. I feel a large amount of affection towards old Riki. The photographs take me back there.
That might be London, that one. They flipped from Edinburgh to London. That's it, yeah. That's London, that one. Yeah. These are original prints which Robert produced during his student days and junior hospital days, and a lot of evenings were spent doing this with this projector. It's enlarger rather, and these trays of chemicals he had. That's how I see his pictures. They are what he saw, and he had an eye open for it all the time. He was always very alert to every possible situation that was going on around him as a potential photograph. We enjoyed seeing them as they kept coming and coming and coming, and then they burst into colour in the late 60s, and they kept on coming. They became a flood in the 70s and the 80s. So yes, it's a record of Robert's life. And we just sometimes wonder, why the heck are you doing this? Because it's an all-consuming hobby. And it was a hobby. It wasn't a profession. Yeah, he had his real work to do, being a doctor. But it's nice to know that they are being appreciated more and more and more by more and more people. We knew that they were good. We knew there was some really high quality stuff here. We're very proud of him. We've got this mountain to go through to sort of archive it now.
I used to be lively, but I'm not now. Ever since I had a stroke which paralysed my whole left side, I've been struggling to stay alive, really. And there's not really much left of me, really. Except for a few jokes. I wish Jane was here. I loved her. And she's a great supporter of my photos.
She believed in your work.
Yes. And she guarded me. She looked after them and tried to organise things, but it was difficult. And I still miss her. As do my boys.
Come on then. Let's not get too maudlin.
Yeah. Get called for a joke.
His face. After my dad shot all these black and white pictures he was developing himself, he took a lot of pictures on slide film. So we've got cupboards full of slide boxes, and then drawers full all over the house. Sort of the tip of the iceberg, what we've managed to digitise so far. In here, there's a few more shoe boxes really full of slides. I don't really know about the order of things at all. In fact, a lot of these just say miscellaneous on them. And then some of these just say X tray. I think that's my mum's labelled those when she's been sorting stuff, but I don't know what the tray is that it refers to, and she's passed on, so I can't ask her. That's an old, that's possibly his original one from the Edinburgh days. He's taped over the nick on to be a bit stealthier, press-on style. Shoe boxes, prints probably, usually. I know, for projection, said. But yeah, family, frosty morning in February 1980. So my mum was in here starting to organise stuff before she died. The system is a little bit muddled, I would say. She picked out some of what she thought were the best. He was quite careful about his own system at the time he was shooting, but when it comes to storing them all, I guess that's where things have got a little bit more confused. Were you bothered about getting any kind of recognition?
I didn't think about it, no, I was really sort of quite a loner, really. I didn't show them to people. And the prints all stayed in the yellow boxes, hidden away.
The kids are posing there, because this is what used to happen when you went out of an evening and kids were playing in the streets, and if they saw you with a camera, they'd say, "Take me a picture, mister." This is just further up the street, near where Rob was living in Hamilton Place at the time. And it's sad to see, all this is gone. This whole street's gone. This is street photography, I think, at its best, just capturing what was going on in the street. You just wouldn't pay any attention to this normally, but Robert was there, and he was ready to take the pictures all the time. This is why he has this huge collection of wonderful shots. He was prepared. He was out looking to see what was going on. and capturing what it was without any anticipation of what would be there. But he was there ready for it. A lot of these people don't realise that they've now been immortalised.
I think in a way, a lot of the pictures, it was as though they were put there for me to take a photograph of. I didn't have to set the stage. The stage set itself. The picture was presented in front of me. All I had to do was use the camera. It was a doddle.
Speaking of which.
It's close to my heart. Maybe this my heart. It's really deep in there.
Hope you enjoyed that, everyone. It was a huge hit at the City Arts Centre during the exhibition. Like every part of that exhibition, huge clusters of people watched it together, sharing their thoughts and reflecting. Thanks to Stu for a really beautiful piece of work, which I know the family will always treasure. So I'm just going to kick off tonight with a little introduction to the family, and then we're going to bring the rest of the family in. Robert Blomfield, Edinburgh Street Photography, an unseen archive, ran from the 24th of November 2018 until the 17th of March 2019 at the City Arts Centre. And I had the greatest pleasure in developing the programme to accompany the exhibition, but also led on the social media around the exhibition. I started about a year before the exhibition opened, and I started teasing some images over our social media, and I knew at that point that we were onto something really special. And for the next few months, I just had the most kind of wonderful time just teasing these images and getting people's reaction to it. And as the exhibition approached, I just couldn't wait. I was so excited because I knew that we were going to be deluged with people, and we were. During the exhibition, I was also privileged to get to know Robert's family, and I think it was just wonderful to see their belief and passion and support for Robert's work so powerfully evident during the exhibition, and which only grows now, with so much love and recognition from the public. Tonight we have, in this In Conversation, two of Robert's three sons, Will the eldest and Ed the youngest, and Robert's brother Johnny. Johnny is a really great speaker and gave talks during the exhibition run, and we had much bonding and laughs over family stories and anecdotes. Johnny was so patient, feeding me with an unending supply of photos to feed the hungry beast that was our social media. every single second day I'd say, more photos, Johnny, more photos. And that night in my inbox, there would be more photos. It became so apparent that people wanted to see more and more of Robert's work. And through our social media, we were able to show a much wider body of work that was possible than we were able to show in the gallery. Johnny, Will and Ed are going to each choose a series of photographs now and give us insight into why they love that particular photo. And I've also got a few choices in there. And while we're streaming this, get your questions ready, and we'll discuss these questions at the end. Just pop all your questions for any of us in the comments in the Facebook stream. So we're going to switch to presentation mode now so we can discuss the photographs. Enjoy them. Will is up first to introduce his dad.
Right, okay, thanks Margaret. And just before I do bring up the presentation, I just want to say thanks again to Stuart, who I think is watching tonight, because I was welling up watching that again. I've seen it hundreds of times. It always gets me, and I'm sure Ed and Johnny felt the same. So
I couldn't watch it, to be honest. I put it on mute.
Yeah, it's just so good. It's the best thing that's sort of happened to us on this journey, really. That film. Right, I shall share my screen now. Hang on. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, just as a sort of scene setter, before we get into the pictures that we've all selected, we thought we'd share a picture of what the artist looked like a few years ago. So this is our dad in Edinburgh in 1959, looking young and handsome, and very different to how we remember him, because we've only ever known him, me and Ed and George have only ever known him with a beard. So so this is what he looks like without a beard. This is probably fairly early on in his Edinburgh days, looking slightly sheepish because I assume that the person taking the photo is using his camera, and he's posing rather awkwardly. But it's funny to see him without a beard. So later on in the show, you'll see another one where he's transformed into the bearded version. So the first picture I've selected is this one. I'm just going to leave that there for a second. So, I mean, it's obvious why I've chosen this, really, isn't it? It's just two kids before the internet, before mobile phones and Xboxes and all the rest of it. This is all you needed to keep a kid entertained, was a car tire and a bit of what looks like licorice shoestring. So that's what I'm going to get my kids. That's what I'm going to get my kids for Christmas.
Maybe it's a strip of the car tire.
Is it?
I don't know.
It could be. It could be anything. But they're just so happy. You know, they're in their own little world. My dad must have, I don't know how he's got this angle. He must have crouched down, or you know, he's got really low down to capture this version of them. But it's amazing.
He was lying. He was lying in the road.
There you go.
On his front with a 200mm lens.
Yeah.
And it just captures sheer joy. And this is what's so great about his kids stuff. It's so innocent and full of joy. A lot of it, and all aspects of children's lives are shown in it. Yeah.
So it's no coincidence that this has been a popular image, and it's the one we use for the website. So yeah. Right, moving on.
This is one of mine. This was taken just after he got back from an amazing bicycle ride to Istanbul on his own, and he got back again with hepatitis. And this traveling he did, he loved to travel. It broadened his view, his areas of interest, I feel. This is quite a sort of historical document, because this is all gone, this street in Edinburgh. And you'll notice the coal lorry, which has got two types of coal on sale there. On the left, it's 8 shillings a bag, and on the right it's 9 and threepence. That's 40p and 47p, I think now. And there's the lady in the white plastic Mac, and the signs. Robert loves signs, so he's got children's playground sign there, and then the one up on the left there, please do not spit on the pavement, and that was lit up at night because there's a pub there. And of course, don't miss the hearse down on the right there, because the smoke was just terrible, and people were certainly suffering in those days from not only cigarette smoke, but smoke coming from the chimneys. So that's quite a historic, and there's a historic document in its own right, with Salisbury Crags in the distance, showing, you know, the bit of the volcano which was Edinburgh millions of years ago.
I like that you spotted the hearse, Johnny. It took me a while to pick up that. Okay, next, Ed.
Yeah, this is my first choice. I guess as an arts graduate, I can only marvel at these human feats of engineering. I never understand how these giant buildings and bridges get made. It's amazing to me. And this shot looks, well, it captures that, but it looks so much older than 1962 to my eye. It has that kind of classic feel, like a Brunel construction or building the Titanic, you know, 100 years ago. It looks ancient and yet just amazing in the sort of science that's involved in it. The buildings in the foreground are dwarfed, which gives it this sense of scale, and it's obviously an iconic landmark within Edinburgh. And there's a story behind this one as well, which I don't know if Johnny wants to go into, but my understanding is that on one moonlit night, my dad and Johnny snuck into the construction site and climbed up the catwalk to one of the towers. And the thought of that gives me the absolute heebie-jeebies. I would be terrified. But it didn't seem like a walk in the park to him. And Johnny sort of played that down.
It certainly was a very easy walk, because it was a very wide gangplank. You can see it underneath the big fat wires there. It's a broad slatted way that the workmen could get to the work. But do you notice also these Anthony Gormley-like characters standing on the structure there? You know, I went to San Gimignano a few years ago and saw these, looked up the towers, and there was this Anthony Gormley stuff. Well, here, instead of just looking pretty, these guys are actually doing something. These Gormley characters on the structure there.
Okay, Margaret.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me to choose my favourite. So I've got 3. This is probably my favourite shot of Robert's. I absolutely love this shot. I love absolutely everything about it. I love the exploration of light, its composition, and the swirling enigmatic smoke, the beautiful peephole. It's like a stage shot of some kind of very slick 1950s film. Wearing my engagement hat as well, it's a gift of a photo from a social history perspective to explore the fashion of the time, the mannerisms, and tells so much about the era. I went to Glasgow University, not Edinburgh University, and I can say that my student unions did not look like this, and people did not behave like this either. I also recall a photo that Johnny showed me in our various dialogues, which Robert took at the Steelworks at Rotherham in 1954 at just 16 years of age, and it really struck me that even years before he went to Edinburgh, the shafts of light in the Rotherham Steelworks photo, that he was really interested and has this natural eye for atmosphere and details and interest in light and shade. This artistic mastery depicting the light and shade isn't easy, as photographers on this will know. It shows a direct parallel with the photos of the great French street and humanist photographer Robert Blomfield, and I absolutely love it. If I had to choose my favourite, it's this one.
It's a good shot.
Definitely was one of the most popular ones at this show, judging by the feedback we had.
And we were, what I should say as well is we have now got a print of this in our collection, two prints we were gifted. And this is one of them, which I'm delighted about. And it's actually, we've got a new acquisition show coming in the autumn at the City Arts Centre. And this print will be in that exhibition. So people of Edinburgh will be able to come back in and see it. Yeah,
it's a lovely shot. And when it was blown up big at the City Arts Centre, the more you looked at it, the more you saw. It's one of those. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. So this is one of mine. Now I chose this. Well, obviously it's a great shot, but I also chose it because the first time I saw it, unusually, was at the City Arts Centre. It was a shot I hadn't seen before, and Ed had selected it, and it was blown up. It was one of the big shots at the City Arts Centre, and it was a bit of a sort of jaw-dropping moment seeing it blown up like that, because it's to me, very unusual for him. It's not really his style. It's very kind of New York looking and, I don't know, architectural. And then there's just these two lonely figures standing there or walking along. Very striking image, and I just loved it. I just was gobsmacked that it was one of his, because I'd just never seen it before. And then to see it in that context so big, it was a bit of a wow moment. And I love it when his photos make me just stop and gawp. It's great. I love this. Definitely one of my favorites.
This is taken from the same viewpoint as that previous picture. That previous one was in midsummer. This one was taken in April, a year later. In fact, this is 1966, the other one was 65. He's using a long lens, and he's caught one of those crucial, decisive moments. You see how the two ladies there, they're just about to put the foot down on the right foot down. He caught the right moment. One split second earlier or later, it wouldn't have been half as good. He's immortalized these three people who, without them knowing it, they'd have no idea that we're looking at them now, 60 years later, and they're strolling in the evening light at the end of Grassmarket. It's a wonderful shot, and the composition is just perfect. He was leaning on the bridge, George IV Bridge, up against the building right at the south end of the bridge to steady the camera, because for a long shot you need to have a very good purchase on, and he never used a tripod. He was all handheld. All these pictures are handheld, but he used, I think that picture of him, a self-portrait, where he had the camera perched on a car with a delayed action shot, but he generally wasn't encumbered by photographic sort of equipment of that sort. Lovely shot.
I like that.
Yeah, this one taken outside the Royal Scottish Academy. I like it because there's a lot going on, for starters.
Not half.
Yeah. Everyone's engrossed in their own world, and nobody seems particularly aware of the camera either. And at the show, or after the show, somebody approached us, a lady called Ottilie, and said that she was pretty sure that the couple kissing in the background were her parents. And I've got her email here, and she said, my parents have long since divorced, and me and my brother and sister have grown up and have kids of our own. When I saw that picture, I had a very strange feeling, as if the past was still going on somewhere. My parents look so young and passionate, and completely unaware of having their photo taken. And I really like that idea, that the past is still going on somewhere. And I felt that recently looking at pictures of my dad since he passed away. And Yeah, it's a powerful idea, one that sort of resonated with me, I suppose.
It's an amazing composition that with the symmetry about it, and yet the different elements that make it up with that great big pillar in the middle. It's a wonderful shot.
And I think that it sums up photography too, in a way, that you're capturing these moments and that they live on. It's what you were talking about in the last picture, Johnny. You know, the camera has that power.
Yeah, this is one of mine. I've chosen this because I just think it is absolutely bonkers. From a City of Edinburgh Council point of view, councils consult now in so many ways, usually e-surveys, and people in cities probably think that you are either consulted too much or too little. But this concept that there was a lamppost competition in Princes Street Gardens was just genius. And the thought of this happening now just makes me want to crease with laughter. And perhaps I'm just too much immersed in council kind of way of thinking. But Robert has captured these passerbys looking quite bemused, and I just love the craziness that this was captured for posterity. And I just wonder if people at the time were kind of thinking blooming typical council, or if they thought it was wonderful. I'd love to know which lamppost won and found its way into the streets of Edinburgh. So yeah, I just love that for its craziness. Will.
Yeah, I like it. Here's another one of mine. I didn't realise it was in Stuart's film, but I caught a glimpse of it when we were watching it just now. It's funny that it's not the best shot in all of this slideshow. It's not the most popular or most engaging or whatever. But the reason I picked this is because I see my dad in shots like this, perhaps more so than any shot. This is his sense of humour shining through, because 99.9999% of the population would walk past this little box and not pay it any attention. And even the people scrawling graffiti on it probably didn't think it looked like this comical face staring out. But my dad saw it and he thought, that's a good photo. And there we are. And I just love it because it reminds me of when we used to, be driving around or being driven around by him, and then he would screech to a halt, jump out with his camera, which was already around his neck, and jump out and take a picture of something that he'd seen that amused him, something like this, or a billboard or something. So this is how he operated. He just saw things that passed other people by, and it's just encapsulated in this picture. So I just see him when I look at this picture.
Looks like a friendly robot.
Yeah.
It looks like something out of Wallace and Gromit, I think. It's Trip to the Moon, one of these. Yes.
I wonder who Betty is. Anyway.
Most of Robert's pictures have got people in them. And this is typical of Robert's work. He was particularly good at capturing people, unlike the previous picture, which is an anomaly, really. This is looking up Arthur Street, and the young girl got in touch with us when the exhibition was on and introduced herself. She's Anne McLaren, standing next to Danny, her young admirer, where she lived in Arthur Street in November 1960. Their friendship didn't last. She doesn't remember Danny's other name, but Danny, if you're out there somewhere, she's asked us to let you know that she gives you her regards and do get in touch. But that was 60 years ago. She said, we lived on the first floor at number 32 Arthur Street. I can't remember a lot about it, except it had high ceilings and there were fireplaces in most of the rooms. That's why there's so much smoke in Edinburgh in those days. We moved to Middle Arthur Place at some point, but we were not there very long. All I recall about that flat was that it was very dark and the steps to it were very steep. When the buildings were condemned, all the residents were dispersed to the new public housing estates around Edinburgh. We moved to Craigmillar and lived there for about 3 years before we bought a flat in the centre of Edinburgh. I stayed there until I married in '76 and moved to Berlin, where my son was born. My husband was in the army, and after 2 years, we moved back to Edinburgh and settled in Slateford. Her name is now Anne Oxley, but no longer married. She has, she's in her mid-60s, obviously now, having retired, been a civil servant in Edinburgh for many years, and lives in Georgie with a cat called Lucy. There you are. So that's the backstory to this picture. She's alive and well and living in Georgie. That's part of Edinburgh.
It's interesting to hear that backstory, but I think it's worth pointing out as well that even without any of that, this is probably the picture that has resonated the most, even more so than the student union pic, with people who have no idea who this person was. It just seems to capture that that time, and being a child in Edinburgh at that time particularly. There's been quite a lot of people that have wanted to get copies of this picture in particular. I think it certainly sums it up really.
It shows how universal his attraction is in his pictures.
Mm.
That's
this
you.
one, yeah, that's one I've picked out. It's another very popular one, and it's another one that shows the decisive moment, doesn't it? It's got that Bresson-esque feel to it. It's, I mean, I love cats. I've got a cat myself. I can only imagine what he would make of being targeted like this. We've called it target practice, this picture. I don't know whether the kid managed to hit it. That's part of the fun. What happened next? What did the cat do? What was the reaction?
Yeah.
And another interesting thing about this picture was just before the show started at the City Arts Centre, we were doing some media and the BBC came round, and the camera woman saw this one and she said, "Oh, it's the Edinburgh cat. That's the cat." She said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, there's cats that look just like that all over Edinburgh. That must be the sort of the matriarch, if you like, or possibly patriarch, but its offspring anyways apparently live on around the city streets today." So she said, and I thought that was interesting.
I'm rooting for the cat.
Yeah.
Another one of mine. This picture I picked for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's just an amazing picture. The composition and the expression, the enigmatic expression on this girl's face is it's just haunting. It's just, she's staring you out, and it's sort of reminiscent of that famous photograph of the Afghan girl who was on the cover of National Geographic, I think. It's got that kind of intensity about it, and I love it. I love the expression, her hair, but also the swing. The swing just looks amazing. You know, they don't build swings like that anymore, do they? So that's one reason. The other reason is it reminds me of my mum, because not that she looks like my mum, but my mum picked this picture to be the kind of publicity photo when she was alive and trying to get our dad some recognition. She put on a little show, a fairly modest show, not on the scale of the CAC by any means, but in his local town they had a little show, and this was the thing that she used, the image she used for the publicity for that. And inspired by that, I made a little book for them as a kind of memento of this first enterprise, and I called it The Girl on the Swing. So it's got this double edge for me. It's for me quite an iconic shot. It's
a more difficult picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's challenging.
It's challenging. It's not something that many people might feel comfortable having on their wall. staring at them, but it is undoubtedly striking.
I asked him about it not long before he died, actually, and he said, I said, did you take more than one shot of her? And he said, no, just the one. And then I buzzed off.
The ladies on the bench. I just love this for lots and lots of reasons. I think that when we categorise the Edinburgh shots, we can categorise them into a changing and lost Edinburgh being documented, and then there's the street kids, and then there's the artistic shots that we've looked at, which TVA is one, and The Man in the Snowstorm is another one. But the ones that I actually personally love are his views of the adults of Edinburgh, some tender and sad, but some really humorous. And I just love these shots of the matriarchs of Edinburgh. He just captures the strength and resilience of these women who would not be seen out in town without their hats, their best handbags and Sunday coats. And all Edinburghers of a certain age will remember this. They'll remember their granny, or they'll remember their mum with these coats going downtown. I also love this image because it's so powerful at the moment and something that we can all identify with just now. Just that yearning that we've got to meet up with our friends and sit like sardines on a bench and have a gossip and talk about how we can basically fix the world. Lots of these images of women are either looking through windows or looking into shop windows or looking out of cafes. And we've talked a lot about, the kind of French photographers, but a lot of these women, for me, are quite kind of evocative of the Chicago photographer Vivian Mayer. She did a lot of the kind of women of the city looking in and out of windows, and I just absolutely love them. And I have doing kind of throwback shots and things like International Women's Day, National Gossip Day. I love doing kind of throwback posts on the City Arts Centre page focusing on the women of Edinburgh. So I love this.
With the face in the window. It's a bit of social history. It's Robert's Banksy, I think, this one. Only Banksy hadn't been born. This was taken in 1966 and Banksy was born in 1975, I think. In May 66, Robert met Norman Hall, the picture editor of the Times, through a mutual friend, and Hall immediately took a strong liking to Robert's work. And he devoted one of his regular half-back pages of the Times to his photographs, and a feature in the British Journal of Photography annual for 1967. But when he saw this picture, he said, no, I can't use that. That's just too threatening, the glass there. Robert recorded what he found. He didn't stage his images. This was in Scotland Street somewhere, I think, no, Jamaica Street. And he never set these pictures up. He just found this, and he took several shots of the little girl, and they're all very good. This is the best one. He never set things up, very, very rarely, and there was no prompting involved.
Well, it's quite a change, isn't it, from the last picture? The last one is another challenging one. It's quite upsetting in one way, and then this is just a really beautiful picture, isn't it? It's the Meadows that I remember well from my time as a student in Edinburgh. He's presumably shot it with his longer lens through the snow, and it's lent it this surreal quality. It looks like a painting, looks like an impressionist painting, which he was a big fan of the impressionists, and so that resonates with me. It feels like his tribute to Monet, if you like. yeah, it's just, and I just like the idea that a guy hurrying through the storm on his way to work, or maybe back from work, could find themselves the subject of such a sort of a beautiful image. It's magic, that one. That's another of mine. Yeah, I find this one quite touching. It's another where he's had to get down low to get that angle. The child looking out over that vast sky, it sort of invites you to ponder the big questions. It's almost like the child's wondering about life, the universe, and everything, which my dad liked to do as well. And I think it kind of it marries up two themes in his work. So earlier on, a lot of photos of the children playing and so on in Edinburgh, and then later on he took a lot of photos of nature. He said he'd kind of had enough of capturing people unawares, being cheeky, if you like, and then he moved on to taking all sorts of photos of the mountains and skyscapes and flowers and things like that. And this seems to bridge that somehow. And I just find it quite sweet, you know. It's sort of lonely in one way. You wonder where the parents are. But it's also very sweet and sort of pure.
I love this one. It's it really does catch you. He got caught out here. I don't know that any of people who are watching tonight have tried street photography, but this is your comeuppance when you don't quite get it right, and yet it's even better than not getting it right, you could say, because Margaret, you used this shot and the lead up to the exhibition and on Instagram, and it prompted some comment about the ethics of street photography. You know, some said it was an invasion of privacy. Others that surely you should ask permission before you take pictures of them in the street. Well, Robert didn't have the time or the inclination for such niceties when he chanced upon Mrs. Stan Scoville on the left and Mrs. Claire Hume having a chat. He didn't know who they were, but one was, the lady on the right had come from Murrayfield Gardens, and the other one could come from near the sea. As it turns out, so far as the children of these two ladies are concerned, it was a wonderful thing that Robert did, and they let us know about it. One of Mrs. Hume's daughters, the one on the right, the one who's giving him the stare, she said, "Tell Robert how much amusement and pleasure his photo has given all the family. It captures perfectly the look of displeasure she would express whenever the occasion merited it. And it really has brought her back so vividly to us all, and we are so grateful." Oh, and by the way, that's her Morris Traveller parked brazenly on the corner outside Mr. Campbell's fish and poultry shop. Now, I did tell Robert shortly before he died what they said, and he was relieved to know that the families of both these ladies had forgiven his rude intrusion with his camera.
Mic drop. I mean, this is another stare, isn't it? And another funny one, really. That's why it's funny. He had a few altercations with the authorities in his lifetime, and his favourite anecdote that we recalled at his funeral was when he was in his hippie phase in Piccadilly, in London, Piccadilly Circus, and blowing bubbles in a sort of peaceful protest with my mum, and just the two of them, really. And they got arrested for this because they were upsetting, according to the police, upsetting the tourists, and it actually made the national news. And I just think that this picture, you know, he always found that anecdote funny. I think he found authority figures amusing in a kind of Monty Python way. He liked to poke fun and take pictures where he shouldn't, perhaps shouldn't, or at least the sign might say so. And I imagine that they weren't too happy to have a car crash scene photographed, although it's just a prang by the looks of it. But it's just funny. They're so stern, and that's why it's funny.
And it almost wouldn't be as funny if it wasn't such a nice car.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's taking some pleasure. There's some Schadenfreude, isn't there? And the Jaguar has been damaged. And yeah. And I think, just briefly, sorry, I think that we were contacted as well by the offspring of one of those police officers. Yeah.
This is another one of yours, Ed.
Oh, me again. This is, from the Gorbals. He didn't shoot in Glasgow very much. Johnny might be able to say how many trips, 1 or 2, was it?
2. Yeah.
2, yeah. But this was definitely, as far as I know, his favourite. One of his favourite pictures of all. He called it Fairy Snow, because they're playing with a little detergent box. It's called Fairy Snow, if you can see that, and they look like little fairies. Really, it's very innocent in this urban landscape, and yeah, I just know that he really liked it, so I thought I would include that one if we're going to put one in from Glasgow. He was actually disappointed it wasn't in the book, and we had to explain that, you know, the book was about Edinburgh, not Glasgow. Well, you know, but hopefully in a future publication it will feature.
It was also, I think it's worth saying, it's also one of our mum's favourite shots. Something about it, about those 2 little girls, really resonated with her. This is one of my selection. In fact, I've got a pair of shots that I'm going to sort of compare and contrast. So this is quite an early shot in terms of Edinburgh days. It's 1958, and it's the student union. It's a dance night in the Café Olé, and it's just a great shot. It's a very clever shot, the lighting and everything. I mean, considering, you know, he was shooting in near darkness, he's captured some amazing details, not least of which is the couple in the background who are staring intently at each other. You know, obviously some romantic connection going on. But you can pick up, you know, the kind of vibe of the night, and it's the person whose back is illuminated by the spotlight. You can see the sort of fibers on their clothing, and it just, everyone seems very kind of quite relatively formally dressed, and, you know, their hair is all perfect, and they're dancing, you know, quite conservatively. And then you compare that to the next shot, which is 11 years later in London, again in a nightclub somewhere, and it's actually the shadows of a load of hippies freaking out to who knows what, Jimi Hendrix or something. Their image has been captured in the strobe light that's illuminating the, you know, what's going on. And he's just caught this moment, and in doing so has captured the vibe of the 60s at that time in London, just a complete contrast to the other scene. And even though there's no actual people in the shot, it's just shadows, you can still tell so much about the era, and the fact that they're, you know, hardly wearing any clothes, their hair's all long, they're dancing in a completely different way. and it's just a totally different night.
Do you want to flip back to the other?
Yeah, I can try. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
It's just great as a pair. I mean, they're both great shots, but as a pair, you just sort of think, you know, before and after. And the other thing that I like that
times they are changing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit more subtle is in both cases, it's worth remembering that he has taken a camera, a heavy Nikon camera, into a nightclub. I mean, we take our camera phones out when we're allowed, you know, to back into pubs and stuff, but he's taken a really heavy camera into a nightclub and started taking pictures of people, which I don't know, it's just funny to think of him doing that. And Johnny was telling me that this shot, there's a color version of it,
right.
which means that he must have had two cameras around his neck to have, you know, two films on the go at the same time, two cameras. It's just even more dedication to the cause of his photography, that is.
I would point out that it is possible that this was taken at a stage show in the Roundhouse in Chalk Farm, but I have no evidence of that rather than a nightclub. It's possible that it was done of a stage show, so they could be actors.
Could be.
Yeah.
They're still dancing pretty amazing.
Maybe somebody watching tonight will be able to tell us they were there. And
it's still more freeform though, isn't it? A bit more Austin Powers.
Yeah, very Austin Powers. And another one for me that's a couple of years later, but I picked it because, well, this is the original pyramid stage. So this is the second Glastonbury. But the first time the pyramid stage appeared, I picked it because it's showing, again, a bit like the one Ed was talking about with the child sitting on the bench and the sky filling it. It's showing him getting more interested in nature and sunsets and the color, the use of color, how he captures that. But it's also still got this kind of street photography vibe with the pyramid stage poking out at the bottom, which just sort of pulls the whole shot together and just makes it quite iconic. It's certainly one of my favorite shots of the Glastonbury set. But yeah, it's just a really nice shot of nature, but also of, you know, man as well.
50 years ago this year.
Yeah. So we were hoping to make a bit of a fuss about this picture, but obviously Glastonbury didn't happen. So 50 years of.
Were you at this one as well, Will? You were at the first one, right?
I was at the first one and the second one, well, you know, with M&D. And the first one started actually on my birthday. I can remember I gave him a bit of a hard time a year or two ago when I sort of realised that my second birthday was spent traipsing around the field in Glastonbury. You know, no birthday cake, no balloons and all that jazz, just a kind of barren field in Glastonbury.
Oh, but tickets were £1 to that.
Yeah.
And they gave you free milk.
Yeah.
At Pilton, at Worthy Farm. Yeah.
And here he is. This is his lordship at the other end of his journey, and now sporting a fine beard and a tie-dye t-shirt. So this is what he would have looked like at Glastonbury. Glastonbury 2, yeah. So a bit like that shot of the people dancing, you know, by at night. He's sort of undergone this transformation from quite a sort of innocent-looking undergraduate to this fine fellow,
looking like an extra from the Dead Poets Society to to this.
Yeah.
An extra.
So I think that's the last slide.
Apocalypse.
Indeed, that is.
So I'll stop sharing that.
What a collection of amazing photographs, really. It's amazing when you look at them all kind of like that, one by one. So there are some questions. So is it okay if I just direct some of the questions to you now? So Nori, who runs Loves Glasgow, hi Nori. He's saying at the exhibition he especially loved earwigging in on the conversations of older visitors who recognise once familiar faces and vanished corners. This is kind of something that I always say, which really kind of strikes me about this exhibition, and in many respects for me it's a one-off. I've worked at the City Arts Centre my entire adult life, seen lots of exhibitions coming and going. Usually it's a very passive experience. People come sometimes with family, sometimes alone, and they look at photographs, and we've had some great photography exhibitions as well historically at the City Arts Centre, but they kind of come and they go and they leave. But with this exhibition, everybody talks about it. Our front of house said they'd never seen anything like it before. People would chat, that complete strangers would bond and speak and share experiences. They came in as kind of strangers and they left as friends, and I think some people exchanged details and they actually kept in touch. So I think that was one of the most amazing things, and I have never ever seen it in any of the exhibitions apart from this one that we've had at the City Arts Centre. I don't know what you guys, what your memories of that are, or what you witnessed, because I know that you were there quite a lot with Robert as well. You came and visited a few times with Robert. I don't know whether he picked that up.
He did. Well, I think he was a bit shell-shocked by it initially, because he was, by that point, you know, fairly quite frail. It was quite an undertaking for us to get him up there. He was thrilled. He was chuffed. I think, you know, as much as he says in the film how he was quite a shy character, he you know, he liked attention sometimes, you know. He liked people, you know, and I remember wheeling him around and people sort of seeing him and coming up to him and shaking his hand and so on, and that definitely gave him a buzz. So it was nice that we were able to do that, and I think the film made a big difference too, actually, having that on as part of the show. I mean, another thank you to Stuart, but it enabled people to connect with the person behind the camera, and then they're looking at the shots as well and reminiscing, and yeah, it seemed to have the right recipe somehow.
Talking about Stu, he's left a little comment saying that we've got the Blomfield dream team tonight.
Oh, right. Well, we'll tell George that.
Tell George, yeah.
Yeah. No, Margaret, you did a wonderful job with the pre-exhibition publicity, and we know that contributed a lot towards the success of it. You had over 40,000 visits during the 3.5 months of the show, which we expected just maybe 1,000 might turn up in that time, but 40,000 was way beyond anything we could have dreamed of. And it was an
absolute privilege for me to do that. Social media, people who do social media know that it's a bit of a hard slog to get people to engage with things, especially Facebook, but it was such a joy to get the reaction, and it gave everything back that I gave to it. Really, it was one of the most enjoyable things and projects that I've ever worked on at the City Arts Centre. So you gave me a lot of joy and pleasure as well, so thank you.
It's entirely mutual.
Yeah, we need to thank you too, Margaret. I mean, and Maeve and everyone else that was involved, because I went round as a student in Edinburgh to various institutions up there on my mum's behest to try and drum up some interest in these pictures, and I was taking around those yellow boxes with the prints in that you saw in the film, and was pretty much turned away from everywhere, really. And I guess, in fairness, the pictures, as time goes by, they sort of ferment, don't they? And street photography is now very popular, but nonetheless, the first people to actually recognize something in them and have the faith to put on a show was you guys, and that was another 10, 15 years later, whenever it was, since I first was sort of going around as a student. So yeah, thank you for that. And
yeah, I should just do a little bit of a shout out to my colleague Maeve. So yeah, Maeve does an absolutely fantastic exhibition, and she gives it her absolute all, and thankfully she did spot something in this, and the whole kind of curatorial kind of joint input with you, Ed and Maeve, and the whole family was brilliant. So massive shout out to Maeve Toll, who curated the exhibition from the City Arts Centre side.
Yes, thank you, Maeve. And another, just in terms of reminiscing, you're talking about the reaction. One other thing to recall was when I came up before the show and saw everything out the first time, I was wow, you know, it was amazing to see them in that context instead of as they had been displayed in my dad's house. And one thing you guys said was, as they were kind of getting ready to open the doors, was, are you ready for all the stories? You know, are you ready for what's coming? And I wasn't ready, to be honest. I thought, because we've lived with these pictures for decades and we didn't know any of the people in the pictures and hadn't really put much thought to that beyond whether they look like interesting characters, what their stories might be, but we hadn't really thought that they were going to come back to life, if you like, and that did happen.
Yeah, I think we weren't prepared for those, and we weren't prepared for the whole, just the reaction from Edinburgh as a whole, the warmth of the reaction to the show, and just from people from all walks of life seemed to be digging the pictures. You know, you had workmen in high-vis jackets getting just as much pleasure looking at them from, you know, the person next door was some kind of, you know, cognoscenti of Edinburgh, and it was, yeah, it didn't matter. They all got pleasure from it and started talking about it. And yeah, I could, like Ed, I can remember, you know, being with our dad, wheeling him around, and people just, you could see them out the corner of the eye nudging each other, going, no, I think that's the photographer. And then they'd come over and, are you Robert? Yeah. And then they were just gushing with their praise. It was lovely to hear that.
Okay, I'm just going to go forward with some more questions now, because I'm aware that time is slipping away a wee bit. So Alan is asking, I see that Robert also shot in Glasgow. Did he ever compare what it was like taking photographs of the two different cities?
Not as far as I'm aware.
No, I've not had that conversation, or didn't have that conversation with him.
It's fair to say he only spent one day, if that, in Glasgow when he took those Gorbals pictures, and that was really it. He did make another trip or two, but no, that's the main body of his Glasgow. Only a couple of dozen pictures, and he wasn't really seeing the social differences between Glasgow and Edinburgh in any sense. His approach was, whatever interests me, I'll photograph. He wasn't concerned with the particular places. Wherever he went, he just took amazing photographs, whether it's Istanbul, Sheffield, London, Glasgow, Edinburgh. And the appeal of the pictures is universal as well. People from all over the world appreciate the pictures he took, not necessarily just Edinburgh people at all. And also the best comment I recall in the wonderful comments book you've got of the exhibition was from someone from Cromarty, who said, honestly, came into shelter from the rain yesterday, been back 3 times, bloody marvelous. And that sums up the whole show, really. You don't have to appreciate the amazing compositions of the pictures or anything, or the place even. They have a universal appeal. So I'll leave with that thought.
It's answering the question slightly differently. Looking at the pictures from Glasgow and Edinburgh, there isn't a striking difference, but from the same period when he was travelling to London and back and forth, the pictures from London compared to the pictures in Edinburgh are very different. There's a very noticeable sort of vibe to the London shots compared to the Edinburgh shots. We haven't really shared much of the London shots, but when we do, I'm sure other people will pick up on that. It's just a completely different kettle of fish.
It's swinging 60s, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's Selfridges and chauffeurs and people with fur coats, and there's more wealth. There's still some hard-bitten streets in there as well, aren't there? But there's a lot of multiculturalism that's noticeable in his London shots. Yeah, they do feel, you've got a real sense of place from those, don't you? Contrast.
Lots and lots of comments just about people saying it's their favourite exhibition, people who are regulars at the City Arts Centre saying it's their favourite exhibition. And as I say, we have had some brilliant exhibitions, photography exhibitions. We've had Cecil Beaton, Ansel Adams in 2008 and Albert Watson retrospective, and I think it was 2006. So for people to say that, that is really high praise indeed. So lots of people saying that. Chris is saying, super exhibition, has the notion of street photography been diminished by the fact that it's now taboo to photograph other people's kids?
Has it been diminished? Well, I think it's obviously we live in a different day and age, and again, I had a conversation with my dad about this very thing. Not very long ago, it was probably about a year ago. I filmed him because I wanted to capture this conversation. I was asking him about, did you not feel weird taking pictures of kids? You're there in a playground, with a camera. You don't have any kids of your own, and you're taking pictures of other people's kids. What, doesn't that strike you as weird? And he said, no. And he was just calling it like it was. It wasn't weird then. I mean, it was more weird that he had a camera, because most people didn't have a camera. Everyone has a camera now. But he had a very honourable agenda, which was to take some great photos, and he has done. So yeah, it's a shame, but it's.
I think innocence is a strong theme in the work, whether it's Edinburgh, Glasgow, some of the shots from London. He was interested in childhood, and my mum became very interested in education, and that became her career. And listening to Cat Stevens, Where Do the Children Play, was sort of their anthem. Certainly hers, and that affected my dad, and I think that comes through in the pictures. There's sort of a celebration of that and a kind of reminder that we need to look after the next generation and think about where the spaces that they're in, I suppose.
Especially now in this lockdown sort of environment, and they're just glued to the screens.
Yeah, actually, I've quite a topical comment from Alicia, who's watching with her 5-year-old daughter. And her 5-year-old daughter keeps on chipping in and asking lots of questions and doesn't understand how Robert could possibly be a doctor, because he's obviously a photographer. Is Alicia's 5-year-old daughter.
Well, there you go, out of the mouth of babes and sucklings.
Exactly. Alan is asking a bit of a technical question on Snowstorm. He said, did Robert manipulate the processing and printing of this to achieve this amazing technique?
That particular picture, no. He that's as it came out of the can, as it were. He would in landscapes, he would do some augmenting of the clouds or something like that, by just allowing more time on that area of the sheet of paper to be exposed.
Burning.
Yeah, dodging. And but no, he never manipulated like that at all. That is how it came out. And he did several snow shots and they all have that wonderful quality to them.
But I might chip in here as well. I've edited a snowboard magazine for many years and seen some amazing pictures, snowy pictures, and that is one of the things about snow. When you shoot through it, especially with a long lens, sunlight and so on, you can get incredible effects just through the camera lens. You don't necessarily need to manipulate it.
Right, I've been told by Street Level Photo Works Glasgow that we have only just got a few more minutes and I have to wrap up. So there's quite a few more questions. So thanks everybody. I know that we have gone over a bit, and thanks for everybody who stayed with us. There's just so much to talk about. I'm just going to find the last couple of questions.
We can always answer questions, you know, after this thing.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go on the Facebook page and try and answer them in due course.
Okay. Well, last question then again from Alicia. Is Robert's work destined for an archive, and are you planning a longer documentary about his work?
I'll start. I think, well, the documentary question first. There has been some interest, which a production company has approached Will about doing a film, which would be great. They mentioned the BBC. Fingers crossed, but nothing is certain at this point. But we're keen if they are. The question of the archive, that's something that we've been wrestling with, particularly since he's passed away, and the physical archive is now, you know, ours. We need to get to grips with what we've got really first, because there's all sorts, because he wasn't a professional, and the cataloguing was progressively looser, if you like, through the decades. There's all sorts of family pictures and other things in there, and we need to get to grips with its extent. So our plan at the moment is we've taken it all to my brother George's house. He's not here tonight, but and we're going to start scanning it ourselves and create a digital catalogue, so we've got more of a handle on what we're dealing with. Particularly the colour stuff, because most of the black and whites have been scanned by Johnny, marvelously, I should add. But there's 2,000 black and whites ish in total, and that's of the prints that he made by hand. That doesn't include the negatives, which is a whole other question. Getting those dealt with properly, because they're quite fragile, is something we're keen to have an institution help us with. But then we've got all of these colour slides, and there's probably north of 20,000 colour slides. So we're starting that process now, organising them as we can physically, and then sending them off to be scanned. And that's going to be a time-consuming, costly exercise. So we've actually just today launched a Patreon page. I think it's patreon.com/Robert Blomfield Photography, to try and drum up some support to keep that project going. And people can then get their first look at things as they're hot off the press, if you like, some highlights as we're scanning them. And then once we've got a good idea of what we have, then we're hoping to find a permanent home for the physical archive. I think that's the idea. Will?
No, that's it. That's exactly it. Can't really add anything to that.
It'll enable us to weed out the family pics and things like that as well. But I mean,
from a selfish point of view, we are going to unearth some family shots that haven't seen the light of day for decades potentially, but we know in amongst those are going to be some other amazing shots that are just going to be colour rather than black and white.
There's quite a lot in London from sort of early 1970s, late 60s even, that are in colour, because there was a transition phase in the late 60s, and then he went full colour from about 1970. Isn't that right, Johnny?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up just shortly, but before we do, I'd just like to mention that you can buy the book from the Street Level Photoworks bookshop, and what we'll do is we'll put the link in the chat on the Facebook stream, and any questions that we've not been able to answer as well, the family will go through and answer some questions, because I know that there are quite a few that we've not been able to answer, and we'll put the link to the book. And it really is an absolutely fantastic book. We were asked constantly during the exhibition if there was a catalogue, and we didn't at that time, so it's absolutely fantastic now to have that resource. So we'll pop that. And I think a really nice kind of comment to finish is from Jane Micobland, who runs Stirling Photography Festival, and I think that her words will echo really what everybody's thinking tonight, that there's been something really special about hearing you as a family talk about Robert's photographs, the stories behind them and from the people in them. And I think that that has been one of the most kind of powerful things, being involved in this project from start to finish and where we are now. So thanks to everybody for joining us, and for those who stuck with us. We're sorry we went over a wee bit. And I'd like to say a massive thanks again to Street Level Photoworks for hosting this, but especially to the family and to you, Ed and Will and Johnny. Thanks very much. And we'd just like to say thank you and goodbye from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.